Hi friends, are you ready for more Frog and Toad? We're ready for our second chapter called The Story. Do you have your book out? Are you ready to read along with me? One day in summer, Frog was not feeling well. Toad said, "Frog, you are looking quite green," said Frog. Sorry. "But I always look green," said Frog. "I'm a frog." "Today you look very green, even for a frog," said Toad. "Get into my bed and rest." Toad made Frog a cup of hot tea. Frog drank the tea, and then he said, "Tell me a story while I'm resting." Is that a nice friend taking care of him when he doesn't feel well? "All right," said Toad. "Let me think of a story to tell you." Toad thought and thought, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. "I will go out on the front porch and walk up and down," said Toad. "Perhaps that will help me to think of a story." Toad walked up and down on the porch for a long time, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. Do your mom or dad or grandparents ever tell you a story when you're sick in bed? I know my mom did. Then Toad went into the house and stood on his head. "Why are you standing on your head?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I stand on my head, it will help me to think of a story," said Toad. Toad stood on his head for a long time, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. Isn't that kind of silly? Then Toad poured a glass of water over his head. "Why are you pouring water over your head?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I pour water over my head, it'll help me to think of a story," said Toad. Toad poured many glasses of water over his head, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. Still no story. He's kind of doing some silly things though, isn't he? Then Toad began to bang his head against the wall. "Why are you banging your head against the wall?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I bang my head against the wall hard enough, it will help me to think of a story," said Toad. "I'm feeling much better now, Toad," said Frog. "I don't think I need a story anymore." "Then you get out of bed and let me get into it," said Toad, "because now I feel terrible." Why does he feel terrible? Because he's been standing on his head and hitting his head against the wall, right? Frog said, "Would you like me to tell you a story, Toad?" "Yes," said Toad, "if you know one." "Once upon a time," said Frog, "there were two good friends, a frog and a toad. The frog was not feeling well. He asked his friend the toad to tell him a story. The toad could not think of a story, so he walked up and down on the porch, but he could not think of a story. He stood on his head, but he could not think of a story. He poured water over his head, but he could not think of a story. He banged his head against the wall, but he still couldn't think of a story. Then the toad did not feel so well, and the frog was feeling better. So the toad went to bed and the frog got up and told him a story." The end. "How was that, Toad?" asked Frog. But Toad did not answer. He had fallen asleep. What good friends. I hope as we read these stories, you'll realize how good of friends Frog and Toad are and what it means to be a friend, right? They're trying to take care of each other. All right, I will see you next time for our next chapter called A Lost Button. See you soon.